Hello, welcome to this video on OET listening. In this video, I would be showing some of the common mistakes that candidates make in part A of listening. That is, the situation might be they would have clearly listened to the audio, they would have clearly understood the accent, understood the meaning, identified the answer rightly, but still they fail to score marks. Why? So there are some common mistakes that candidates overlook or some common mistakes that go unnoticed. So I would like to bring forth those mistakes so that you don't make the same mistake again and lose marks unnecessarily. So let's start. Now the first one is, as you can see on the screen, writing a synonym instead of the exact word. So when it comes to listening part A, it's not multiple choice question, you have completion task wherein you have to answer in total 24 questions, which is divided into two sections, 12 in one and 12 in another section. And all of the questions are in the form of completion questions. You'll be having blank spaces in between, and as you listen to the audio, you have to fill in those gaps with the most appropriate word that you hear, that you listen. So the word that you fill in those gaps should be what you listen in the audio. You cannot paraphrase it. Even though it might convey the same meaning, you are not allowed to, or you're not supposed to paraphrase it or use a synonym of what you hear in the audio. I'll show you an example. Now suppose if in the audio you hear the patient say, as you know, in part 1 you get to hear healthcare consultations where a patient would be conversing with a healthcare professional. And majority of the answers, that is 95% of the answers, would be coming from the patient, except for a few wherein if the healthcare professional has advised for a test or any other investigation, so such answers come from the healthcare professional's part. Other than that, all the answers would be coming from the patient's side. Now in the audio you hear the patient saying, I just never know how I'm going to feel from one day to the next. It's the way the symptoms are so unpredictable that I hate it's hard to plan my life. So the patient is expressing about how his or her symptoms are, like it keeps changing from day to day. Now the question that you might have in the question booklet can be words used to describe symptoms. Now what you heard in the audio is, symptoms are so unpredictable that I hate it's hard to plan my life. So you will not get a mark if you write uncertain. Uncertain, it's same as unpredictable. You're not sure of the symptoms. Unpredictable also means the same. But you're not supposed to write like this. This is one thing that candidates need to understand. Sometimes some candidates are not aware of this. They might think that, okay, I've identified the answer and I've put it in a different way. I'm just showing off my language skill. No, when it comes to your listening, don't show off your language skill in that way. Just write what you have heard. So you will only get 1 mark if you write the exact same word as you heard in the audio. So if you write unpredictable, you get 1 mark there. Don't go for paraphrasing, no synonyms. So this is the point that you have to keep in mind. Synonyms are not accepted in part A of OET listening. You must write the exact word from the audio. So now that we have understood one common general mistake that candidates make unknowingly, let's move on to the next one. Spelling errors of common words or medical conditions. Some candidates have this notion that, okay, spelling mistakes are accepted, or like, okay, I've identified the answer rightly, it's just a matter of spelling mistake, maybe I'll get half a mark. No, there's no half mark or quarter mark when it comes to listening part A. If your answer needs to get 1 mark for a specific question, it has to be completely right, including the spelling. Only then you get a mark. Now, for instance, in the audio you hear, the patient says, then my GP said it's pneumonia. Pneumonia, I was shocked. The question is GP's diagnosis. And for pneumonia, if I write Neumonia instead of Pneumonia, you're not going to get a mark. You might think that, okay, even without that P, pneumonia sounds as pneumonia, then why don't I get a mark? No, pneumonia is a very common medical condition. So if the answer is a very common word or a common medical condition, you are expected to give the answer with the right spelling. If not, you're not going to get the score. So this is another common thing that you have to keep in mind. That is, misspellings that result in a different word or invalid word leads to loss of marks. You've written the word. Now when you read that word, okay, it might sound like pneumonia, but if it is a word that does not exist or does not make any sense, then you will not get scored. Okay. Now that we have understood about spelling errors, let's move on to the next common mistake. Right form of the word, noun or adjective, using the right form of the word. Sometimes for your answer to make sense as per the question, you will have to focus on the right form of the word as well. In some cases, you will have to make adjustments with the grammar so that grammatically your answer is right. Let's look at the example. The audio says, the patient is saying, well, I have a lot of health issues. I have diabetes. Oops, it's not diabetes. It's meant to be hypertension here, okay? Hypertension. Okay, the audio says, well, I have a lot of health issues. I have hypertension, found out 5 years back. I'm diabetic as well. Now, the question booklet contains a section of medical history. So, the first point is given there. The first medical condition is already listed out there, hypertension. So, this is done. And for the next one, a blank space is given. So, you have to identify the next medical condition. Now, what you heard in the audio is, I am diabetic as well. I am diabetic as well. You have heard two conditions. First, they are saying, the patient is saying that I have hypertension, which was diagnosed 5 years ago. Then the patient says that I am diabetic as well. Now, when it comes to the question booklet, in what format the medical conditions have been listed. Hypertension has been mentioned as such, hypertension, which is in the noun form. So, you're expected to present the next answer also in the noun form. Now, if you write diabetic here in this blank, then you will not get scored. Instead, you have to write diabetes. The audio says, I am diabetic as well. But in the question booklet, one condition is given in the noun form. So, the next answer from that list should also be in the noun form. So, if you write diabetic, you will not get marks there. You have to write diabetes. You have to look around the list to see in what form the rest of the answer or the rest of the words are listed out, and accordingly you have to fit in the answer. So, this is one thing that you have to keep in mind. This is another mistake that students make. They just write as it is without looking around how the list is. So, the answer must fit into the given list format. Only then you will get marks. Then moving on to the next one, single word or compound word confusion. Now, there are certain words like that sometimes students fail to identify whether it should be broken into two different words and written, or it should be written as a single word. Now, even though the answer might be right in terms of spelling and everything, but if one word has been written as two different words, then again you fail to score a mark there. I'll show you an example. If the audio says, the patient says, this has been going on for many years. After meals, I always tended to get heartburn. And the question says, has had dash over long period. So, you know the answer is heartburn, because the patient says that for many years this has been happening. After meals, I tend to get heartburn. And the question says, has had dash over long period. So, you understood it's heartburn. But if you write heart space burn, then that will not be counted. Heartburn is one word. It's a compound word. It should not be written as two different words. If you write like that, you don't get marks. Now, there are other words just like this, like breastfeeding, nosebleed, headaches. These are all some other words which students write it as two separate words. Sometimes student writes headaches. No, but headache or headaches is one single word. Then same goes with breastfeeding. All of this should be written as one word. If you split and write, you're not going to get scored. See, sometimes this is what happens if a candidate might be doing self-preparation or self-evaluation. Like they might attempt a question, they might attempt a test, and they might be evaluating it on their own. So when they cross-check it with the answer key, okay, I've written headache there also it's headache. But they don't pay attention or focus on this aspect, whether they have written it as one word or whether they have written as two words. All these things matter. These are sometimes factors that are overlooked by candidates. Now, this is one thing that you have to keep in mind. Using the wrong form, that is, if you split or merge, then it might lead to, not it might, it will lead to wrong answers. These are often clinical terms, so check their standard usage. So you have to have an understanding of which have to be written in the split form, which have to be written in the merged form. Okay, so just go through or have an understanding of the common medical terms or words that you come across in your daily life and make a list of such words, compound words and single words. These are all part of your listening preparation. Now let's move on to the next one, illegible handwriting. This is another thing that you might not be able to identify on your own. Maybe when you're correcting, just give it to one of your friends or your teacher. Only then they would be able to identify what the problem is. Now, when you're checking your answers on your own, you might feel that, okay, I've written the answer. It is right, it matches the answer in the answer key, the spelling is right, if it's a compound word, I've written in that way, grammatically it is right, all is fine, but only I'm able to read my answer. No, then you fail, you don't get score there. For instance, if you're writing like, if I have to write chewy, and if I write like chewy, I can identify this as chewing, but nobody else can do that. So your handwriting needs to be legible. It should be very clear. Only then you'll get the score. So if the assessor can't read your handwriting, you may get 0 even if the word is correct. So bear that in mind. Then another common thing is writing outside the answer line. Actually, you might not be even thinking of such a possibility of losing marks. See, suppose if you write the answer here, for instance, symptom, if you have to write sore throat, and if I write sore here, I don't get marks. I have to write it on the answer line, S-O-R-E. Only then I get 1 mark. So only content on the answer line is marked, others are ignored. Beware of that. So the space will be provided to you and make sure that you write your answers into that space neatly. Then giving more than one answer. Now sometimes you might be confused between 2 answers. So you, like some students who are really smart, they does this. They put a slash and write fatigue or tiredness. They give an option to the examiner. But say that is not accepted. You have to finalize on one. Now initially you wrote fatigue and then you felt it's tiredness. That you have finalized on one answer means you have to strike out one. If you feel that fatigue is the answer, you have to strike out then. It's not necessary that you have to sit and erase. Even if you strike out the other one, then this will be considered as the right answer. But if you give an option like this, then that is treated as invalid and you will not get score there. So make sure that giving more than one answer or putting the answer in a way wherein you are giving the examiner a choice to choose from one of the answers, when it comes to completion task, you will not get marks there. Then, okay, so if you write multiple answers without clearly deleting one, it will be marked wrong. Please keep that in mind. Then incomplete answers, missing key details. This is another problem. That is, students sometimes say that like, I have not included a specific word. This part of the answer I have written, but like the answer was in 2 words, but I just wrote only 1 word. Now, is that okay? It depends on what word that you have missed. If it's a key element which is very essential to be there in a consultation note, then if you miss that, you'll not get scores. I'll show you. For example, in the audio, the patient says, from the past 2 days, I've had severe abdominal pain. Now, when you talk about pain, the words that describe the pain matters to the healthcare professional. Mild pain, severe pain, moderate pain, all these have different interpretations. So it is important that you include that also in the answer. And if the question booklet contains this question, presenting complaint, and you just write abdominal pain without paying any significance to this describing word, then you will not get marks. Only if you write severe abdominal pain, your answer is treated as right. So keep this in mind that partial responses are not accepted. There is no half marks as such. Words which are used to describe symptoms should be there in the answer. Now, having said this, I would like to bring up the next point, adding words from the question prompt. Sometimes some words might be there in the question prompt already, but due to careless reading, students might repeat words. That can again result in losing marks. I'll show you. The previous one was wherein you did not write the complete answer, you missed a word. Now the same problem, or it can happen in a different way. You will not be noticing a word which is already there in the question booklet and you will add that word as well. Then also that will turn out to be a wrong answer. For instance, you hear in the audio the patient saying, "I've felt a strong pain in my chest." So just now we heard that, like just now what did I explain before this? It's very important to include the word, the describing word for pain. The adjective is also needed to be included in the answer. So keeping that in mind, okay, the patient reported. So reported, and what you hear in the audio is strong pain, and you immediately write strong chest pain. But you see, reported intense, which means that the word strong they have already included in the question booklet, but they have paraphrased and put it as intense. So now if you write reported intense strong chest pain, that doesn't make any sense. Instead, how you should be writing reported intense chest pain alone, because instead of strong they have put the synonym of it, intense. It's already there in the question booklet. So reading around the question, the blank space, is also very, very important to understand what all words are already there in the question prompt and what are the words that you need to add in as you listen to the audio. Okay, now so you only need to write what is missing. You only need to write what is missing, not the entire sentence. Then using abbreviations not in the audio. Now, being a healthcare professional, sometimes you feel that, okay, some words like there are abbreviations which are universally accepted. So why should I go for an expanded form? Now again, as I mentioned earlier, this is not a platform to showcase your medical proficiency. This is a language test, listening test, so you should be writing as you hear it in the audio. I'll show you an example. If the patient says, "At first the nurse started on intravenous fluids." Now, if I think that I know that intravenous fluid means IV fluids, everyone knows that. So why should I take the trouble, or why should I take the pain to write it as intravenous fluid? And very smartly I write it as, for this question, initial management, administration of, I heard in the audio that the nurse started on, at first the nurse started on intravenous fluid. So at first is initial management. The nurse started on, that is administration. Intravenous fluid, I hear it from the audio. So I know that intravenous fluid, it means IV fluid, it's one and the same. People use it generally, and I write IV fluids. If you do so, you will not get marks. You have to write as you listen it in the audio, intravenous fluid. If you write it as such, like how you heard in the audio, you'll be getting marks there. Now, these are some of the common mistakes that we have noticed among our students. So next time when you do your listening test, when you evaluate it, make sure that you don't consider or you don't compromise on these aspects, because now when you're doing your practice, when you compromise on these aspects, if you don't take it seriously, when you do your actual test, there will be a tendency for you to repeat the same mistake. So take these points which we have discussed today seriously, and make sure that next time when you do your listening test, take into account these factors. Okay, hope you found this video helpful. We'll be back with more such videos. Stay tuned.
MedCity International Academy. Trusted hands forever.